Welcome back, everyone. It's now time for our first panel of the day. I'm really looking forward to this, and it's under the title of the R word. Finally, time to tackle racism in PR and communications. The panel is going to be moderated by Barbara Phillips, who's the Director of Brownstone Communications, but also the chair of the recently launched Race, Ethnicity and Equity Board, or REEB, at the PRCA. I've only just started to get to know Barbara over the last couple of months, but I love her drive and her passion, which I think is exactly what the industry needs. And by trade, Barbara focuses on transformation employee communications through coaching, storytelling, and through her knowledge of neuro-linguistic programming. So I'm going to leave Barbara to introduce the rest of the panel, and then I will come back when the panel is done. Barbara is going to facilitate the Q&A. So Barbara, over to you.
Thank you, Jim, for that sterling introduction. I appreciate that. So everyone, yes, we have a great panel. We have a discussion. I know the panel discussion is our word, finally time to tackle racism. Clearly, we're not going to do that in 30 minutes. But I just wanted, before I introduce the panel, I just want to take a moment to recognize that for someone who's been in the industry, and many of you out there, for over 20 years, racism is a word that we haven't been allowed to speak about. We haven't been allowed to talk about it. We haven't been allowed to address it. So this panel is just a way to start breaking down that barriers, opening it out, letting people get a little bit more comfortable with talking about race, because that's how we're going to make the changes. So to move on to my panel, the first person I want to introduce is Ete Davis. He's creative CEO of Engine Group. So welcome, Ete.
Hello, everyone.
Hi there. My next person is Mandy Rico. She is Inclusion Director for Kantar. So welcome, Mandy.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. My next panelist is Magin Truella, and he is MD of John Doe. So welcome, Magin.
Hi, guys.
And last but not least, I have the delectable Cynthia Davis. She is CEO of Bain Recruitment. Welcome, Cynthia.
Hi, everyone.
Here she is. Fantastic. So good morning. Thank you again, everyone, for joining. This is going to be quite exciting. So let's move it straight along. Now, we know, as I said in my introduction, that we can't, tackle the whole of racism with this just one panel. But if you look at racism and experiences within the PR and communications industry, I thought we could break it into a kind of cycle. And, you all here are all here and you have a great part to play in that cycle. So I'm going to start off with Mandy. So Mandy, I know you Kantar have an inclusion index, which is great. But generally, when you start talking about racism for any organization, but specifically within PR and comms, first thing a lot of leaders will say, well, where's the data? What data do you have? Show me some numbers. So Mandy, talk to us about what's available out there in terms of data.
Well, the Inclusion Index was created at the end of last year, and it was a way to try to tackle diversity and inclusion within organizations. And to do that, what we had to do was create a benchmark. So what we did is we looked at sending out questionnaires to individuals about their experiences at work. And then what we were able to do is actually slice the data by different diverse groups across the UK. So, for example, if we look at race, and I'm just taking race, I'm not going to touch upon intersectionality during the call today. What we found is that the Inclusion Index told us that there was a heightened experience of demeaning behavior within those that are from an ethnic background. And whilst the overall sense of belonging was quite high and the absence of discrimination was relatively high, it was that demeaning behavior experience in the last 12 months that actually has cause for concern. So what we were actually able to say is that there is a percentage of people that don't feel that they belong within their company, that don't feel that they're valued, that feel that their unique characteristics, attributes, skills, and background are not valued within the company. And whilst these percentages are lower than expected. I'm not talking about everyone feeling this way. What it is saying is that if there's a certain percentage of people in the base size that we looked at, this is heightened when you start looking across the globe. So, for example, if we look at demeaning behavior, 25% of people that we spoke to that come from an ethnic background said that they had been unfairly spoken over and not listened to in meetings. 36% said that they have experienced others taking sole credit for the work that they had contributed to. 24% said that they'd experienced exclusions from events or activities held in the workplace. 25% were made to feel uncomfortable in the workplace. And 31% said that they had experienced or had their learning opportunities or progress restricted by senior leaders. And this, when you compare to, you know, the average across the world, means that there are still pockets that we need to attack. And this is experiences in the last 12 months, where 6 months of them we've been pretty much in lockdown. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that's only heightened by the fact that if they're experiencing that today in 2020, what else is not being talked about? Yeah. Now, however, year on year, what we have... Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to... No, go ahead. I was just going to say, you know, within those audiences, how far can you drill down? Because ethnicity is quite a broad, you know, stroke. So... were you able to be more specific?
Yes, we do. So what we do for every country, obviously you have different ethnics. So what we did is we actually use the census that is out there for that individual country. So we can drill it down to the Black community versus the Asian community versus the I've lost European community. Sorry, I just went blank there for a moment. Obviously not enough coffee. So we can drill it down. We can drill it down to actual within the ethnic community. What areas are we drilling down to? So we can actually drill it down to that. Not only that, we can then drill it down even further and start putting intersectionalities, because we are not just one thing. I am not just a woman. I am not just my ethnicity. I am not just my age. Obviously, I look younger than I am. And I am not just, you know, my abilities or my skill sets. I am more than just one thing. So we're able then to actually slice, you know, okay, well, how do women who are LGBTQIA, from the LGBTQIA community, who are also from an ethnic background, how are they feeling? Is it heightened? Is it less? When you talk about experiences that they have gone through, is it based on their ethnicity? Is it based on their age? Do they feel that it's based on their gender? And we can really drill down into those intersectionalities and those perceptions. Now, just one thing to note, and I think it is actually a positive, is that year on year, we have found that this year, more people have found their voice to escalate when things are not working bad. To escalate bad behavior, to escalate bullying, to escalate feeling uncomfortable. And this has almost risen by, in the UK, by almost 20%. So that shows that everyone's finding their voice. Which is
people are... It is. That's fantastic news. I just wanted to bring my other panelists in as well, in terms of how that's great. How you have used data. Have you had access to data? I mean, I've all got a role for you all to play, but I'm interested to know if, you know, how you've used data, have you access to data in this question of, you know, being more inclusive in your organizations. So Megan, Cynthia, Ete, data.
I'll go first. And so within Engine Group, for several years, we've been doing employee surveys to understand the representation that we have across the business, but also people's experiences, everything from mental health to development. You know, in truth, we are still very much, I think, on a journey to be really representative for ethnic minorities within the business. And the recent, the sort of last 7 months, and in particular the exposure that the media gave to the prevalent systemic issues of racism that, you know, minority communities are experiencing, that became a debate, highlighted, I think, the fact for us in the business, our data wasn't really doing enough. You know, we could see the data that was just giving us the quantitative information of like, this is your makeup, but not actually drilling down, to your point, into what's the difference between people's intersectional experiences, what's actually the things that are predicating the challenges with our pipeline that we don't get enough representative talent in, but also what's happening as we go through to progression.
Which we'll come to.
So we've had to, I think there's a lot more work that the data needs to do. It was great listening to what Mandy had to say, and I'd like to chat with you offline about that actually, and how you can work more with us. And, you know, the results were disheartening, not entirely unsurprising, but as you say, more people finding their voice. I think the key thing for us as a business is that we've realized that our data isn't doing enough. And so we're actually using the data to inform decisions rather than, I think, just measuring and monitoring, which is the key thing, driving action from the data that you gather.
Yeah, which we'll get to. Okay, well, unless you have, Megan, did you have a short comment, or should we?
Yeah,
should we move on to the next
page? In terms of.
Okay, we'll move on.
Okay, there's a delay there.
Yeah, there is a delay, so apologies. But go ahead, Megan.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, in terms of we've done similar sort of data collection to Ete, but just to build on this point about that provoking action is sort of using that to identify what are the key issues that we have, or what are the key areas where we're having success, and using that data to actually build specific targets. And that's what we've been able to go on to do. So whether it's campaign representation, we've had to create our own data, so auditing every campaign we've done for the last 2 years and looking at the representation that we had on shortlist that went to clients, looking at the representation that then went forward into campaigns, auditing those kind of things, and then being able to build a set of targets that come off that, and doing a better job moving forward of then tracking it, and then going on to share that with clients to say, look, this is where we want to be. This is the proportion of non-white, let's say, talent that went onto a shortlist for a particular campaign. Over the course of a year, this is what actually came out of that, and use that as an opportunity to provoke conversations with clients.
Excellent. Okay, so so it's actually, I was gonna come to you next in any case. So I understand, and I've looked at your organisation's commitments that you made. 2 parts I have to that is, first of all, I know you've been active in this space, so fill us in a little bit about what you were doing before George Floyd and before the commitments, and then you started to speak a little bit about, you know, what you're using, what the commitments are, how you're using them, because people obviously, a lot of people made a lot of statements, they blacked out their logos. What are people actually doing? So fill us in.
Okay, cool. So I've been running John Doe for about 3 years. And prior to this, I hadn't run an agency. So I came from in-house, and before that, I worked at a number of different agencies, and I've been frustrated by a lack of progress on diversity for a long time, pretty much throughout my career. And so one of the drivers for taking this role a few years ago was to have the opportunity to build a business and build an agency that truly represented the city in which it's based, I guess. So we'd already been doing quite a good job of building a more diverse team. So we're almost 50% non-white. We've got 50% black representation on our leadership team. And we've always created very representative campaigns. So that's something that, is kind of in our DNA anyway. But what we recognized this year, it was funny you mentioned the Black Tile, because that was actually the sort of driver for any more significant change. Was Black Tile Tuesday, there was a massive debate on our company WhatsApp as to whether or not we should do one. And it was kind of split. I'd say it was actually split down generational lines rather than sort of ethnic lines, if you like, about whether it's the right thing to do. In the end, we ended up doing it anyway, but it provoked a massive debate across the business around what's the action that goes with that. Like, yes, we've got a diverse team. Yes, we create representative campaigns, but there's nothing enshrined in sort of policy. So nothing's codified in what we do. And therefore, we're not really accountable to anything. And something could change, and in a year's time, like, the work that we've done is worth nothing. So we put out a number of commitments, made some really specific statements around like numbers behind representation on campaigns, representation on shortlist for recruitment. What are the areas of what we do that we actually have the power to impact? So it was supply chain, creative partners, recruitment and representation in campaigns. Put some actual numbers behind that so that we're actually accountable to something. That then led to us auditing everything we did and that we've been doing for the last couple of years, and actually found we're already achieving most of the targets that we've set ourselves. But now we've got something that means there's no easy way out. You know, you can't just go, oh, well, actually, we need to rush. Like the client wants it tomorrow, so like just get them whatever they need. We're actually held accountable to something, and that's provoked kind of cultural change within the business, where actually, you know, procedural change is really hard to then create a process that, you know, makes you stick to that. But that's the work that needs to be done if you're really going to do something genuinely proactive and genuinely sustainable, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, tell me, how did you figure out percentages, and how did you figure out, you know, your targets, if you like? Did you just go strictly on numbers? Because sometimes numbers aren't really it. Sometimes it's the decision makers, who's in the room, having a feel, spreading, you know, representation. How did you come to that? Did you just stick to numbers?
Yes, we did stick to numbers. And one thing I would say is that it's not, you know, the process that led to that isn't necessarily perfect, but it wasn't without a great deal of thought, and it wasn't without the sort of the input of everyone in the business. So it was neither top down nor completely bottom up. It was sort of it involved all kind of stakeholders, but also everyone within the agency had a part to play in shaping those. We also, particularly on the recruitment side, we spoke to a number of recruitment partners about what they thought was achievable and what degree of support we could expect from them in helping us to get there. So specifically on the recruitment side, it's a commitment to 33% representation on shortlists for jobs. So is that actually achievable? Is that actually achievable? How what are the steps that we need to take? Who are the agency partners we'd need to work with in order to get there? And then in terms of the campaign representation, those were landed on after doing an audit of what had come before and what we thought was appropriate and achievable, but also stretching. But yeah, in the end, the targets are specifically around numbers. Yeah.
Yep.
Did you want to come in there?
Okay. So sorry.
I was just going to build on.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Megan's point, it's great to hear you that you're doing all of that, and I think going back to your question, Barbara, around like performative allyship, and you know the term that's now coming through, which is like a sort of a accomplice nature, which is what Megan is talking about. That's it's holding yourself publicly accountable, as you mentioned, but also looking at the things within your control. So it's not just the work that you make, but and what you're doing within your talent, but also what are you doing about your supply chain? Like, who are the partners? Like, what's the network that you're working with? And how representative are they of the things that you're seeing externally and your values? So, I applaud you for that. It's we need more of that. We need more real delivery and real action to change.
Yeah, no, that's great. And Ete, nicely, thank you. All segueing yourselves beautifully, so thank you, making my job easier. So if we recap, Mandy says there's data. Gin says this is what you can do with the data. This is how you can use it. This is how you can pull it into your organization. So Ete, you know, a lot of the focus is about representation for the C-suite, getting people of color, Black people, especially Asian people, especially onto boards. You're on a board. Your CEO. I'm interested to know about your experiences, because, you know, apart from being a Black man, you'll always be a Black man. There's all the other, you know, CEO duties you'll have, and you'll have pushback from people who aren't into, racial justice. Tell us about your experiences.
I mean, the experiences have definitely been varied. You know, there's always a challenge, I think, that you have when you're a minority in a position of leadership, that, you know, that there is a implicit kind of impression people have that you've basically been bequeathed the role through your identity rather than through your achievements. Consequently, we often end up having to overachieve.
You got lucky.
to kind of prove ourselves. And then also when you're trying to drive change, not just towards ethnic representation, but inclusivity across the board, it's, you know, that agenda is tied very much to your identity and your own existence, which in part it is, but fundamentally in the communications business, if we don't have representative organizations and companies, we can't do our jobs. We can't service our clients. We don't understand the audiences and the communities that we're supposed to be engaging with. So it's not a political choice. It's not even a personal choice. It's a business decision and a business context that as CEOs, wherever you sit on the ethnicity spectrum, you should be leaning into. Some of us have more of a stake in the game because our skin is quite literally in the game and the experiences that we have are there. But everyone else needs to be on board with it. And I think for where I've been fortunate in my career growth and my role in leadership positions is where I've had leadership who have intuitively believed that inclusivity and representation is the right thing to do, but have also understood that it's a strategic priority and imperative. And so they've made sure that there's equity in rewards, recognition, recruitment, how we're developing people, and most critically, are people getting the same level of sponsorship? That is the profile raising, the opportunity to work on projects, campaigns with clients that develop your skills, your profile, your network, all of those things that incrementally lead to progression, and they lead to more representation at the top. So that's where I've been sort of fortunate. But there is always that underlying story, and particularly with people that don't know me, that get the impression that you've progressed because of a diversity agenda.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit more. I was particularly interested, and I think of interest is how you cope with the pushback, because we know people are uncomfortable about talking about race. I mean, you're a black person standing before them. You are running a company. What does the pushback look like for you?
Well, I think so. I'm South Londoner from Nigerian descent, so I guess I was always quite thick-skinned and sort of bull-headed in that sense when it comes to pushback. If I know something's right, I'm going to sort of make it happen. So I'm sort of fortunate in that sense. But it's sort of all joking aside. There are sort of two tacks that I've tended to take. One is, depending on the individuals that you're engaging with, there is that argument around the commercial and the competitive advantage, like the sort of the rational argument that becomes almost immutable when you start to, as I said before, look at the advantage it gives you in terms of creativity, but being able to understand communities, audiences differently, which is value to clients, and actually the increasing pressure, particularly within the advertising sector, that brands are putting on organizations to be representative, and that's not something that can really be shied away from. Then there is also the sort of the intuitive argument, and going back to the point about performative allyship, I think the bulk of people within our industry may believe or purport to be fairly liberal, fairly open-minded, fairly inclusive. They wouldn't consider themselves either racist or prejudiced. And I think a little bit of holding the mirror up and explaining to people the things that they don't know that are substantiating and supporting a system of inequity and prejudice, and how they can change it. So it's appealing to people based on where they lean, really, whether it's the emotional, the intuitive character side of you, or just getting down to business and saying, actually, this is why it's important for us to grow as a company.
No, absolutely, well said. And you mentioned something we will have time to get to, but in the whole schema of things, it's not just intake into your organizations. There's also supplier diversity, there's partnerships, there's all sorts of things, which brings me to Cynthia. So Cynthia, I'm not going to give him any credit, but there's a gentleman in the States, CEO of a bank, who went public, this book, I'm sure you read about it, that there not being any pipeline of talent. And this is an old trope that I've heard forever. I've been in the industry for 20 odd years. If we could find the people, we'd give them the position. So Cynthia, bust that myth, please. We know there's pipeline. Tell us about the pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in the recruitment sector now for 20 years, and it was that made me start my business, because I was just so fed up of hearing that excuse that we can't find black talent, or there aren't people that are qualified at certain levels that come from ethnic minority backgrounds. For me, that's not good enough. And in this day and age, that's just lazy. It's lazy, and it's an easy excuse to not hold yourself accountable for driving change. So for me, I always want to call those people out. It's either they're not looking hard enough, they're choosing not to see the talent, or they're not giving the talent opportunities in the first place. So it's not that the talent isn't there. I mean, we live in London, one of the most represented cities in the world, where everybody is represented on the streets. But when you look inside organizations, that's not reflected. And for me, the question is why? Why is there that disparity? And we have to look at the processes and the systems that are in place that stop people from either coming into certain organizations or coming into certain sectors. And it's because of that lack of representation. When people don't see themselves represented either in sectors or in certain roles, they feel it's unattainable, and therefore they don't even bother. So it's not that the talent isn't there. Sometimes the talent it's not a level playing field. That is a fact that we know. And it's also how, recruiters and myself being a recruiter, I know that the way recruiters tend to recruit, and it's very much about giving you what you're used to anyway, because there's the commerciality bit that recruiters are driven by. So they won't, unless you're challenging your suppliers, they will keep feeding you what they've always given you, because they know you will keep taking it. So I was really, really impressed to hear Margin saying the fact that they now have this target. And for me, it has to go further than just the target. You have to hold them accountable. If they're not supporting you and they're not giving you that talent, don't use them, get rid of them, find somebody else. You need to hold them accountable, but you also need to hold yourselves accountable as well as organizations to say, we also need to be doing better and looking at our pipeline and looking at our processes and looking at ourselves. If we bring in that talent in, what are we doing to promote them to move up? Because unless you're also doing that, guess what? They will leave. So it has to go hand in hand with all the actions that you're doing. It goes beyond just saying they don't exist, because we know they do.
If I could just build on that.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
My experience with recruiters since making those commitments has been quite mixed. So we then sent a challenge to each of our recruitment partners saying, this is what we want to achieve. Are you able to kind of help us get there? And some have really leaned into it and come straight back with, these are our policies. This is the representation we have within our portfolio of candidates. These are the steps that we want to help you take to get there. We're sort of all in. And others have come back, really challenged it. Sort of, there's only X% of candidates we have. We've done a scrape of LinkedIn and we can only find X, Y, Z. And they just don't want to do the work.
Exactly.
And they're not willing to to make it happen. And I think those those recruitment partners out there that are able and willing to sort of to put the work in that's required to make a difference, I guess.
Yeah,
but I'd also go. Sorry.
Oh, you go ahead, Cynthia.
I was just going to say, I'd actually go a step further, because the reason why they may be not able to give you that diversity is because they're not diverse themselves and they don't understand how to connect and engage with diverse talent. So all they can give you is what's in their network and what they know. And therefore, you also have to look at the suppliers and the makeup of those suppliers, because if they're not diverse themselves and you're asking them to diversify you as an organization, they're not going to be able to do it. So you also have to look at, well, how diverse are they? What's their network? Because if their network is just LinkedIn, where everybody's fishing from the same pool of candidates, guess what? They're just going to keep giving you those excuses. Well, we've looked at LinkedIn. There's only 10 people that identify this, because that's all they've got access to and that's all they know. Yeah. So I would also go a step further. Just look at that.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to agree with both, and I think the pipeline challenge or argument, both for CEOs and recruiters, I always have a wry smile at, because we are as business, we sort of look at what's a business critical challenge, and we use all the intelligent people we have in our business to find ways to solve that with lateral thinking. For recruiters, you are specifically paid to solve talent challenges for a business. Like, this is the brief that's given to you. It's not good enough to come back and say, we can't find it everywhere we've looked. Like Cynthia says, look harder. Like, who are you partnering with? Like, solve the problem and you sort of propose to have expertise in. Otherwise, don't claim to have the expertise in finding talent fundamentally. And for CEOs, if it's business critical, you will find a way to solve it. I've never worked with a senior or a leader who hasn't been faced with a business critical strategic challenge and has gone, that's too complex, we're going to ignore it. Those businesses aren't around very long. It happens.
But I absolutely agree.
Exactly.
So,
go ahead, Mandy.
Thank you. I absolutely agree. But one thing I also think is attracting talent, diverse talent externally is one thing. But also, I refuse to believe that in 2020, we have organizations that do not have diversity within their organization. And so what we have to do is ensure that, number one, we're creating a pipeline internally of talent that can move up the ladder and go into those positions. So organizations should be looking at how diverse is their talent pool internally. Who is on their high performers list? Is there any commonalities between that? Because if there is, maybe we should be opening our minds and looking at what else is out there and how we're actually analyzing our high performers. Because if we're recruiting or we're promoting an image of ourselves, well, how are we going to answer questions that are coming in from society? Because society is diverse.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and that takes me to the point of, as you know, I'm chair of the REEV panel, the Race and Ethnicity Equity Board, and in our terms of reference, we've actually put exactly those. It's not only about pipeline and recruitment, it's about inside the organisations, and we've just got a bit more time, so you can all talk about maybe Ete and Gin, especially inside organisations. We've asked for psychological safety. We've asked for, systems and processes that discriminate or hold Black and Asian and ethnically diverse people back, microaggressions. We've asked that all to be within the fabric of your operating model. So tell us a little bit about what's inside your organisations. Clearly you are who you are, but still, you don't have a thread to every single person in your organisation. It comes back to systemic racism. So what systems have you put in place to try and allay kind of this racist issue?
Yeah. On my side,
either of you, Gin, you can go first.
Yeah, on my side, it's interesting you use the term psychological safety. That's absolutely the heart of everything that we have been trying to achieve over the last few years, and threads its way through a style and a culture and a way of working within the business, which is about what is really a truly inclusive environment is where everybody feels that their voice is valued and their voice is heard, and that their cultural reference points are of equal value to anybody else's. So we've got a number of different practices and ways of working in terms of meeting culture, brainstorming culture, and creative culture that focus on ensuring that those values come into play. So just as an example, in every team meeting or in every sub-team meeting, everybody has to speak, and everyone has to be given the opportunity to speak and get their point across. We've got a range of different creative tools that we use in brainstorming and campaign development that cater for different approaches and different styles to creativity and where people do and don't feel comfortable in contributing to ensure that we're kind of catering for all. So I'd say for me, it's those two things. It's about making people feel that their voice is heard, valued, and that their cultural reference points have significance to enable psychological safety.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I agree with Gin. I think there are sort of two structures or sort of two tranches you can address things in, and what we're doing as a business. There's the operational things, which are just honestly putting in place some of the well-established best practice processes around recruitment, around progression, transparency on benchmarking, around mentoring, around sponsorship, that manage your talent pipeline from entry through to whatever journey they have within the business, and like implementing those and making sure that the system itself actually starts to sustain inclusion, and doing those operational things. And similar to Gin, setting representation targets that the leadership team are accountable for delivering on has, sort of given a laser focus to driving those operational and sort of systemic changes that we need to have. The other area to focus on, and Gin spoke about it before, is more the behavioral things, which is very much modeling your values, not like modeling and demonstrating your values, not especially in leadership, but actually how those values exist throughout the business, from meetings to ways of working, to how you engage with clients, to how we recognize and reward each other outside of the work. How do we appreciate each other? How do we conduct ourselves ultimately? So we're doing
absolutely
that values exercise at the moment, and making sure that inclusivity isn't just a value on its own, but is baked into our value around quality, our value around ambition. That it all forms a part of it, because without inclusivity, representation, as Gin said, everybody's voice being heard, it's fatal to our creative process, and we're not
Exactly.
competitive as a business, as I said before.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. So, you know, if we kind of close the circle a little bit. So we know Mandy says there's data. We know there's data. Gin tells us how to use the data. He tells us what to do, how policies, processes, commitments, you know. We have Ete, who's achieved, you know, a sense of leadership. He's there, he's at the top. He's telling you what policies and processes that he has to do to not only battle the pushback, but also, you know, be an effective CEO. And Cynthia has busted the myth. There is no issue with talent pipeline. It never has been. It's all a matter of recruiters wanting to look, wanting to go a bit further, wanting to work a bit harder. And personally, I would say that there's an underlying theme to, you know, all these people, or people on our panel are successive business people. All their organizations are successful, they're profitable, which means this idea that if you move into the diversity space, you know, you're going to lose money. It's actually the opposite. You know, it's an addition to your bottom line if you so choose. But we've got a couple of questions and a couple of comments, and just an underlying theme that I always like to put out there, that everything we said is all valuable. Everything we've said is all we've discussed today is great. But to me, the one core theme is desire. It's desire. It's whether organizations actually want to take the step to address race, to be inclusive. Just in the same way as, you know, before the pandemic, London especially had a massive homeless problem. Then everybody was in hotels. That problem solved. Before the pandemic, you know, working from home, flexible working was an absolute non-start. It was a no-no. It was a brain. It was no. Look at us now. You know, absolutely. It can be mended if you want to. So that says to us, to all of us and everyone out there, it's really about desire. So, you know, you have to have a bit of self-introspection and think, what's stopping me from really making this work? There's good business sense. I know what to do. There's lots of information out there. So I just wanted to put that point across. Now, we've got a few minutes, not very much, but a couple of minutes. So let's look at, there's a couple of questions. There's one for you, Mandy. It's from Rafika Moise. I hope I pronounced that right. She said, she wants to ask a question that refers to the feedback coming from qualitative studies regarding the decrease of belonging sentiment for BAE employees in workplaces. How would you address this potential diversity and inclusion? I think, does that make sense to you, Mandy? Is that the number of people saying they belong has gone down?
So basically how I would address it would be simply, so number one, the inclusion index is done as a quantitative survey that we send out. When we work with organizations along the same lines, what we then do is actually slice the data. We actually have conversations, qual conversations with people from the Black community, etc., within the organization, and speak to them about what concerns they have and what they really want to see make an impact. So what would make them change that mindset? What has to be done across the organization to allow them to feel more that they belong, to allow them to feel safer to speak out, etc. Then what we do is we work with the organization at feeding that information back with the quant study and literally working with a plan of action on what they need to do in order to change that mindset. This way, what it is, it's not only people telling us how they feel, but really working with us at trying to impact change. And that's important because everyone is responsible for inclusion within an organization, every single one of us. It may be accountable at the top, but we are all responsible. If we work together, I truly feel that we can change the world. And that's my Miss World comment.
Answer question. Drink the ocean and change the world. Okay, we've got another question. We're running fast. But this is from Steve Miller. Steve Miller says, this is a tough question, I know, but could each of the panel members give one practical step that PR organizations can take to become anti-racist? Let me answer this one. To wrap it up, I urge everyone to go to the PRCA website, to look under read. Under read, we have terms of reference. We have goals. We have maybe 10, 15 goals of the sorts of things that you can be doing. In addition to that, we're actually working on a guide for to help PR and comms organizations report the ethnicity pay gap. So we're going to produce a series of guides to help you. So I'd say make that your first stop. The idea of READ within the PRCA is to have guidance, consultancy, support, and direct you to specialists who know how to help you. So, you know, Steve, if you need an anti-racist trainer, you know, hit me up afterwards. I can direct you to one, so that's fine. So I'll answer that one. So Emanuela Ibrahim says, how should firms tackle microaggressions in the workplace, particularly if they have a strong formal D&I policy? Who wants to take that one? Who wants to take that one? Or I can answer it because I've had the full range. So who'd like to have a go?
You go ahead, Barbara.
I'll have a go.
Yeah.
Okay, I think this goes back down to the systems and policies. I think if you, as an organisation, especially in PR and comms, because I've worked in many a PR and comm organisation, so if you, as an organisation, or if at the very least a comms team, decide that you want to make your team in your environment psychologically safe, i.e. it's inclusive, as Gin said and Mandy said, everyone said, people are listened to, people are valued, their opinion counts. That's not difficult. So if you just think to yourself, this is a safe, open space where everybody can talk, where everyone is respected, where no one is spoken over, and everyone's personal space is respected, that's a start for the microaggressions. And the second part is when people report, and they're usually black, report the microaggressions, you must listen. Listen, take it seriously, value it. And then the last part, this is a whiz through, the last part is, if somebody has reported a colleague about microaggressions, you must take that seriously and you must speak to the person about it. It could be ignorance. It could be that it's okay behavior. But then it goes back to the culture that you've created. If you've created a culture where it's safe and everyone is respected, I don't think anybody in the, would really think, okay, it's okay to touch Barbara's braids because they will know that's disrespectful. So those are the areas. Again, go back to the READ page, and there's information there. But essentially, it's psychological safety, looking at your policies, listening, respecting, and valuing everyone's appearance. No one can tell me about my lived experience, and you should everyone should respect everyone else's lived experience. That's the kind of short answer. Okay, we've got time. We're on 20, but I'm going to squeeze in one more, if we can. Let's see. There's a lot of, I have to tell you, team, there's masses of really positive comments. I'll send them on after. So thank you everyone who's commented, and along the way there's lots of applause. Yeah. Generally, okay, so this is the last one, which is kind of for me, but I don't want to hog it all. It just talks about why PR has such a poor record of racial inclusion. I don't think it's PR. I think it's corporate UK. We happen to be in the communication industry. But it's corporate UK has a poor record. And I think we know it's race. This is the whole point of this panel. It's mainly race, but nobody has wanted to say the R word. No one wants to talk about it, and everyone's made it everything else. But, essentially, to the core of it, it's race and representation. I mean, that's the short version. So I think we're going to close there now because we're actually at 21. It just leaves me to thank all of the panel. Thank everyone for joining in. Thank all of the panel. So thank you, Ete. Thank you, Gin. Thank you, Mandy. Thank you, Cynthia. I really appreciate all of your hard work and efforts. Let's get this conversation. Let's keep it going. And hopefully we'll create another opportunity to have this conversation again. And everyone else out there, thank you for listening.